Marina arrived every day at 5:40 in the morning, when the commercial building on Avenida Paulista was still just concrete and silence. She knew every sound of that building before the world woke up. The deep hum of the ventilation system, the crackling of fluorescent lights turning on corridor by corridor, the echo of her own footsteps on the marble floor that she herself had waxed the night before. She wore the navy blue uniform with the name of the cleaning company embroidered on the chest, Limpomax, and tied her dark hair in a tight bun that pulled at her temples. She was 32 years old, but her eyes carried the age of someone who had already lived many lives within one. That June morning, the São Paulo cold seeped through the cracks in the lobby as if asking permission. Marina rubbed her hands together before picking up the cleaning cart and pushing it to the service elevator. The cart creaked. It always creaked. She had already asked 3 times for the wheel to be replaced, but nobody fixes what nobody sees. It was the same with the cart. It was the same with her. The 28th floor was the last on her route and also the quietest. The board of directors of Motta and Cavalcanti, one of the largest financial consulting firms in the country, was located there. 4 spacious offices, glass walls, mahogany desks, chairs that cost more than Marina's apartment rent for an entire year. She cleaned each of those offices with the same care, but there was one in particular that demanded something from her that she couldn't name. Rafael Motta's office. It wasn't the biggest, it wasn't the most decorated, but it was the most inhabited. Rafael was, of the 4 directors, the only one who seemed to truly live there. There were books piled in the corner of the table, not as decoration, but as company. Forgotten coffee cups with invisible lipstick marks. He didn't wear lipstick, of course, but he drank coffee so concentrated that the liquid left a dark shadow on the porcelain. Napkins with handwritten notes, numbers, and loose words that Marina never understood, but which she looked at with a curiosity she herself repressed. She knew things about Rafael that he never imagined anyone knew. She knew he arrived before the others, sometimes so early that she was still downstairs and could hear his footsteps in the hallway. She knew he switched pens when he was nervous, using the blue one on good days and the black one on bad. She knew there was a photo inside the second drawer of the desk, a photo he'd never left in plain sight, but which was sometimes slightly out of place, as if it had been handled in the middle of the night. Marina never opened the drawer, but she noticed the millimetric misalignment that only someone who cleans the same surface 300 days a year would be able to perceive. Rafael Motta was 38 years old, with brown hair that was beginning to turn silver at the temples and a posture that oscillated between authority and weariness. He walked around the office as if carrying a weight no one asked him to carry. He was respected, perhaps even feared, but Marina noticed, in the details that people overlook, that he was profoundly alone. The two had never exchanged more than fragments. "Good morning. Thank you." Once he said, "sorry," when he almost bumped into her in the hallway, and Marina was so surprised that it took her 3 seconds to respond. No one apologized to her. No one saw her enough to know she was in their way. At the cleaning company, Marina was what they called efficient and discreet, which, in practice, meant she did the work of 2 people without complaining and never bothered anyone. Dona Giralda, the supervisor, liked to repeat a phrase that Marina knew by heart. A good employee is an invisible employee, and Marina was. Invisible in the hallways, invisible in the elevators, invisible in life. She lived in a 1.5-bedroom apartment in Capão Redondo, shared with her mother, Dona Esther, who suffered from arthritis in her hands and spent her days watching soap operas at a low volume because the upstairs neighbor complained. Marina paid the rent, the electricity bill, the medicine, the groceries. There was almost nothing left over. Sometimes there was silence, and she would sit by the kitchen window and gaze out at the empty street as if searching for an answer to a question no one had asked. She had never really had a boyfriend. There was a guy, years ago, who worked at the neighborhood market, and for 3 months, he greeted her with a smile that seemed sincere. Marina began to believe that maybe this was the beginning of something. She bought a lipstick, a simple drugstore pink lipstick. She applied it the next day. He didn't even notice. The following week, she saw him give the same smile to another woman, and then to another. The lipstick remained in the bathroom drawer, untouched. Sometimes, Marina would open the drawer to get something and see the lipstick there, pink and quiet, like a small monument to the ridiculousness of believing. At work, there was a colleague named Janaína who tried to strike up conversations during breaks. Janaína was outgoing, laughed loudly, talked about her children, her husband, soap operas. Marina listened attentively and responded little, not out of coldness, out of habit. She had learned from a very young age that the less space she occupied, the less chance she had of being pushed out of it. Marina's father had left when she was 7 years old. There was no drama, no fight, no explanation. He simply didn't come home from work one Tuesday. Her mother waited until midnight, then until dawn, then until the weekend. The following Monday, she got up, put on her cook's uniform, and went to work as if nothing had happened. Marina learned from her mother that pain is carried on the shoulders, not in the mouth. That Monday in June, Marina finished cleaning Rafael's office at 6:52. She wiped the desk, aligned the objects with almost liturgical precision, and emptied the trash can. There was a half-empty cold cup of coffee, forgotten beside the computer. She took it, washed it in the break room, and returned it clean to its place as she did every morning. Before leaving, she looked at Rafael's empty chair and felt something that wasn't exactly sadness, nor exactly affection. It was a kind of familiarity with someone she didn't know, an intimacy, constructed inside out, through traces, absences, and objects he touched and she later cleaned. The days went by. June dragged on with its gray skies and cold mornings, and Marina continued her routine with the discipline of someone who has no other choice. Clean, organize, disappear, repeat. But something began to change, so slowly that she herself hardly noticed. Rafael started arriving earlier. At first, Marina thought it was a coincidence. She was finishing her journey on the 28th floor when she heard the main elevator open and his footsteps in the hallway. He stopped when he saw her, as if he hadn't expected to see her. Someone was there at that hour. They stared at each other for half a second, just the right amount of time for a polite awkwardness, and he said, "Good morning," in a hoarse voice, as if he hadn't spoken to anyone that day. Marina responded with a nod and went back to work. The next morning, it happened again, and the next, and the next, until, without either of them planning it, their presence at that time ceased to be an accident and became a kind of invisible frame for the start of the day. He never struck up a conversation beyond a greeting. She never dared to look at him for more than 2 seconds. But something was beginning to take shape between them, nameless, like a plant sprouting in a crack in the concrete, without soil, without care, without permission, simply because it needed to exist. One morning, Marina found a handwritten note on Rafael's desk. It wasn't for her, of course. It was a reminder he'd left for himself. Call the lawyer, sign the papers. She wiped around the note without moving it, as she did with anything that seemed personal. But those words stayed with her all day. Papers, lawyer. Something was happening in his life that she didn't know about, but which she sensed from the way he'd let his shoulders slump. In recent days, the amount of coffee I'd been drinking had increased, and the dark circles under my eyes had deepened like furrows in dry earth. At the cleaning company, the situation worsened in July. Donna Geralda announced there would be staff cuts. Whoever doesn't perform will be out on the street. She said this looking at Marina, not because Marina was unproductive, quite the opposite, but because Donna Geralda had a niece who needed a job. And the easiest place to open was for someone who didn't complain. Marina heard the veiled threat and said nothing. She just gripped the mop handle tighter and kept walking. Janaina, her teammate, came to talk to her in the locker room. "You heard, right? Geralda's watching you. Be careful." Marina nodded. "I know." Janaina wanted to say more, but Marina was already putting on her coat and leaving. There was nothing to say. There was no one to turn to. She was replaceable. The whole world told her that every day, in every possible way. That night, at home, Donna Esther noticed that her daughter was quieter than usual. "Did something happen?" Marina sat next to her mother on the sofa and rested her head on her shoulder. "Nothing, Mom. Just tiredness." Donna Esther didn't insist. She ran her hand through her daughter's hair with the gentleness of someone who knows the exact texture of a sadness that refuses to be named. They stayed there, in silence, while the soap opera played at an almost inaudible volume. The month of July brought a Friday that Marina would never forget. She was on the 28th floor, finishing up the cleaning, when she realized she'd forgotten the glass cleaning product in the cart, which had been left in the storage room on the floor below. She looked at the clock. 6:40. She had time. She took the service elevator, went down, picked up the product, and went back. When the elevator doors opened on the 28th floor, she came face to face with Rafael, who was waiting to get off. He entered the elevator at the exact moment she was exiting, or tried to exit. The two met in the doorway, so close that Marina could smell his cologne. Woody, subtle, a scent she recognized from far away, but she had never felt it like that before. Face to face, just inches away. He stepped back. She stepped back. "Sorry," they said at the same time, and for the first time, Marina saw Rafael's smile. Not a social smile, the kind executives give out in meetings. A smile of surprise. Small, almost involuntary. A smile that lasted less than 2 seconds, but that remained imprinted on Marina's chest like a gentle burn. She left. He went in. The doors closed. Marina stood still in the hallway, clutching the bottle of window cleaner to her chest, her heart pounding as if she had climbed 28 flights of stairs. She took a deep breath. She went back to work, but something had shifted inside her, like a piece of furniture pushed an inch to the side. Almost imperceptible, but enough to change the path of passers-by. In the days that followed, Marina began to notice Rafael looking at her, not in an insistent or invasive way. They were quick sideways glances, like someone checking if something was still there. Once, she was cleaning the pantry when he came in to get coffee. He greeted her, filled his cup, and before leaving asked, "How long have you worked here?" Marina was so disconcerted that she answered in an almost inaudible voice, 4 years? He nodded slowly, as if processing the information, and said, I should have asked sooner. Sorry. And he left. Marina stood there, cloth in hand, trying to understand why that simple phrase had affected her so strongly. I should have asked sooner. 6 words. 6 words that said, I know you exist, I know you were here, and I regret not noticing. The following week, their morning meetings gained a few more words. Good morning, Marina. He learned her name. He'd probably read it on her name tag, but even so, he read it. It's cold today, isn't it? Very. Eyes. 10-second conversations that would be insignificant to anyone else, but to Marina were like tiny slivers of light entering under a door that had always been closed. She hated herself for it. She hated realizing that she was starting to dress better before leaving the house, that she was putting cream on her cracked hands, that she was tying her hair up more carefully. She hated the small expectation that arose in her chest every morning when the elevator opened on the 28th floor. She hated it because she knew it wasn't real. Men like Rafael didn't look at women like her. The world had rules, and Marina knew them all. She had learned each one of them the hard way, by living. Rafael, for his part, carried a weight that no one in the office fully understood. His wife, Beatrice, had filed for divorce in May, after 8 years of a marriage that, on the outside, seemed perfect. Dinners, trips, smiling photos on social media, but which inside was an empty hallway where 2 strangers passed each other without touching. Beatrice was beautiful, intelligent, and the daughter of one of the company's founding partners. The marriage always had a strategic component that they both pretended to ignore until the pretense became unbearable. The photo in the drawer was of the 2 of them on their wedding day. Rafael kept it not out of nostalgia, but as a reminder of a mistake he didn't want to repeat. The mistake of accepting a life that wasn't his. He had spent years trying to be what the company wanted, what Beatrice wanted, what his father-in-law wanted. He had become a competent but empty man, a brilliant executive who came home every night and sat on the sofa with the feeling that he had forgotten something essential somewhere. But he didn't know where or when. The divorce was discreet but painful. Beatrice wanted the penthouse, the car, a share of the company. Her father-in-law looked at him in meetings with the coldness of someone calculating the exact cost of a disappointment. Colleagues whispered. Rafael smiled. Inside, he was crumbling in slow motion. It was in this context that he began to notice Marina, not as a romantic interest, not at first, but as a presence, a consistency. Every day when he arrived, the office was spotless, the cup clean, the objects neatly arranged. There was a care there that he couldn't find anywhere else in his life. An anonymous, silent care, done without expecting anything in return. And Rafael, who lived surrounded by people who always wanted something, a contract, an approval, an advantage, was disturbed by that faceless generosity. When he finally saw her, really saw her, he felt ashamed. 4 years. That woman had been cleaning his space for 4 years, and he didn't know her name. What did that say about him? What did that say about the world he had built, a world of glass and mahogany where the people who took care of everything were invisible? August arrived with a rain that seemed endless. The city was gray, the traffic chaotic, the sidewalks flooded. Marina arrived at work with soaked shoes and dried her feet in the locker room with paper towels before putting on her work shoes. Nobody knew. Nobody needed to know. It was just another one of those small everyday humiliations that she absorbed like the earth absorbs the rain, silently, without choice. Donna Giralda had intensified the pressure. She began inspecting Marina's work with a malicious magnifying glass, pointing out imperfections that didn't exist, timing how long she spent on each floor, making loud comments in front of others. If she can't handle it, we'll put someone who can. Marina gritted her teeth and continued. Giralda's niece was already training to take over the position. It was only a matter of time. Janaina came to talk to her during a break. Marina, you need to talk to someone. What Giralda is doing is harassment. Marina looked at her colleague with eyes that didn't ask for help. Talk to whom, Jana? Who will listen? The question hung in the air between the two, heavy as truth. It happened on a rainy Thursday. Marina was on the 28th floor, later than usual, because Donna Giralda had kept her busy with extra tasks on the ground floor, a deliberate strategy to delay her and give her grounds for a warning. When she finished, it was almost 7:30. The executives were already arriving. She quickly pushed the cart to the service elevator, pressed the button, and waited. The doors opened. She went in. Just as the doors began to close, a hand stopped them. Rafael. He rushed in, cell phone to his ear, talking to someone in a low, tense tone. He didn't even notice who was there. The doors closed. The elevator began to descend. Between the 25th and 24th floors, there was a jolt. The lights flickered. The elevator stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. Rafael slowly lowered his cell phone and looked around. He looked at Marina. She was motionless in the corner of the elevator, holding the cleaning cart, her eyes wide. The space between them was less than 2 meters, but it felt like an ocean. The elevator stopped, Rafael said, as if the information needed to be spoken aloud to become real. Marina nodded. He pressed the emergency button. Nothing. He pressed it again. A click, then silence. He tried the intercom, hissing. He tried calling from his cell phone. No signal. "There's no signal in here," he said, running a hand through his hair in a gesture Marina recognized from afar. The gesture he made when he was nervous. She knew it. She knew it from 4 years of silent observation, and now that knowledge was there, trapped with her in that metal cube suspended between floors. The first few minutes were spent trying things out. Rafael pressed all the buttons. Marina suggested they try the manual alarm. There was a red button under a plastic cover that she recognized because she'd cleaned that elevator dozens of times. He looked at her in surprise, opened the cover, and pressed it. A faint siren echoed for a few seconds, and then he died. "Maintenance should listen," Marina said. "If there's anyone from maintenance around at this hour," Rafael added, and for the first time she heard insecurity in his voice. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Reality settled in like dust. They wouldn't be leaving anytime soon. Rafael sat on the elevator floor. Marina stood, leaning against the opposite wall, her hands clasped in front of her body like armor. He noticed and said, "You can sit if you want. The floor is clean." And then he smiled, with that small smile she already knew. "I imagine it's clean. You clean everything in this building." Marina didn't smile, but something loosened inside her. She sat down slowly, adjusted her uniform on her knees, and stared at her own hands. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was a waiting silence, like the space between two notes in a slow piece of music. Rafael leaned his head against the wall and closed his eyes. Marina watched him unintentionally. Up close, he looked older. Not because of the years, but because of his weight. The dark circles under his eyes were the color of sleepless nights, and there was a tension in his jaw that suggested he constantly clenched his teeth. "Are you claustrophobic?" he asked, without opening his eyes. "No," Marina said. "And you?" He opened his eyes and looked at her with a strange expression. "Don't call me sir. Call me Rafael." She didn't answer. Calling the director by his first name was crossing a line she had been trained to respect. He realized this. "We're stuck in an elevator. I think the hierarchy can wait outside." There was humor in his voice, but also something genuine, as if he were begging someone to treat him like a human being. "Rafael?" said Marina, testing the name in her mouth as if tasting an unfamiliar fruit. "I'm not claustrophobic, but I've never been trapped in an elevator before." "Neither do I." He looked around. "First time for everything." More silence. Marina listened to her own heart and hoped it couldn't hear her either. The white light of the elevator hummed softly, projecting a shadowless brightness that left everything exposed. Every wrinkle, every pore, every truth that normally hides behind glass walls and blue uniforms. "Can I ask you something?" Rafael said. Marina nodded. "That care you take with my office, the neatly arranged objects, the always clean cup. Do you do that with all the offices, or—" He didn't finish the sentence. Marina felt her face heat up. "I do my job well on all floors," she replied carefully. It was true, but it wasn't the whole truth, and they both knew it. He didn't insist. He ran a hand over his face and sighed. "I'm getting a divorce," he said suddenly, as if removing a splinter that had been bothering him for weeks. Marina showed no surprise. She already knew, or at least sensed it, from the notes, the exhaustion, the late nights at the office. "I'm sorry," she said. She was sincere. He looked at her as if trying to gauge the sincerity of that sentence, and seemed to conclude that it was true. "Thank you. Most people say they're sorry, but they're thinking about the dividends." "I don't know what dividends are," Marina said, and this time they both laughed. It was a short, almost embarrassed laugh, but it broke something in the air between them. A thin layer of ice that neither of them knew existed until they felt it crack. 8 years, Rafael continued, looking at the elevator ceiling as if the answers were there. 8 years pretending everything was fine. You know what's worse than an unhappy marriage? It's a marriage that looks happy on the outside, because nobody believes you when you say you're suffering. They look and say, "But you two are so beautiful together. But you have everything." He paused. "Having everything is the most elegant loneliness there is." Marina said nothing, but she listened. She listened with every part of herself, because she knew loneliness, not the elegant kind, the other kind, the one that has no name. Neither the frame of a frame, nor the solitude lived in cramped apartments, crowded buses, and night shifts. And even though these solitudes were so different, there was something in them that resonated, like the roots of distant trees meeting in the darkness of the earth. "And you?" Rafael asked. "Do you live alone?" "With my mother." "Married? Boyfriend?" Marina shook her head. "No." He waited like someone who knows that after no sometimes comes the rest. And it did. Marina hadn't planned it, but the words came out as if the stopped elevator, that space outside of time, outside of hierarchy, had created a kind of stainless steel confessional. No one has ever looked at me like that, like they want to stay. She said this looking at her own hands, with the firm voice of someone stating a fact, not a lament. My mother says I'm pretty, but mothers don't tell. An almost smile. I think people look at me and see the uniform, the broom, the cart. They don't see anything else. Rafael looked at her with an intensity she felt in her skin. I've looked at you for 4 years, and all I've seen is a clean office. I'm one of those people, Marina, and I'm ashamed of it. Hearing her name from him sounded different from any other time anyone had ever said it before. It didn't sound like a call, or an order, or something written on a form. It sounded like recognition. There's no need to be ashamed, Marina said. That's how the world works, everyone in their own box. She gestured with her hand, indicating the elevator. Literally, he laughed. A genuine laugh that echoed off the metal and returned to them like a returned gift. You're funny, he said, genuinely surprised. I don't know why, but I wasn't expecting that. Marina raised an eyebrow. Cleaning people can't be funny. He opened his mouth to apologize, but she interrupted him with a wave of her hand and a tiny smile that said, I know what you meant. It's okay. Time continued to pass. An hour and a half. Rafael's cell phone beeped once, a fleeting second of signal that disappeared before he could do anything. The battery was at 23%. Marina's was at 8. She rarely fully charged her cell phone. The electricity bill was more urgent. Rafael took off his jacket and folded it carefully. He was wearing a white dress shirt, the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. Marina noticed a small scar on his left forearm just below his watch. He saw that she noticed. Bicycle, he said. When I was 12, my father taught me to ride a bike late because he was always traveling. When he finally taught me, I fell the first day. He said I was clumsy and never tried to teach me anything again. He paused. I learned on my own the next day. With this scar as a reminder? Marina looked at her own hands. My hands are always cracked from the cleaning products. I wear gloves, but even so, my mother says they look like the hands of someone who works hard. She stretched her fingers. I wish they looked like the hands of someone who did something beautiful, who played the piano or painted a picture or I don't know. She closed her hands again. I think hands tell our story without asking permission. Rafael looked at her hands. Really looked. Then he looked at his own. Mine sign contracts. That's all they do. He turned his palms upward as if offering something. They've never built anything. There was a sadness in that confession that Marina recognized, because it was the same sadness she felt, dressed in different clothes. The sadness of not to be who you would like to be. The sadness of letting life happen instead of choosing it. I wish I had studied, Marina said suddenly, as if opening a floodgate she didn't know she was holding. I was good at school. My 4th grade teacher said I wrote well, that I could be a writer. She smiled with her mouth, but not with her eyes. But my father left, and my mother needed help. I started working when I was 15, first at a family's house in Morumbi, then at a restaurant, then here. She paused. I never wrote anything again. What would you write? Rafael asked, and the question was so unexpected, so genuinely curious, that Marina felt her eyes burn. Stories, she said, almost in a whisper. Stories of people no one sees. The silence that followed was the most meaningful either of them had ever experienced. It wasn't a silence of awkwardness or discomfort. It was a silence of mutual recognition, of two people who, by accident or fate, had found themselves in a space where masks were out of place. Rafael opened his mouth to say something, but at that moment the elevator jolted. The lights flickered. Marina instinctively gripped the handrail. The elevator shook once, twice, and then nothing. It remained still, but now in partial darkness. Half the lights were out, leaving the space in a twilight that made faces softer and truths easier to speak. Are you scared? Rafael asked. A little. He extended his hand, not as a conquest, not as seduction, as an anchor. Marina looked at that outstretched hand in the dim light, the hand she who signed multi-million-dollar contracts, the hand that had never built anything, now offered to her as if it were the simplest and most difficult thing in the world. She held on. His hand was warm and dry. Hers was cold and rough. And there, in that difference in textures, lay the whole truth about the two of them, separate worlds that touched in the darkness. They stayed like that, hand in hand, sitting on the floor of an elevator stopped between the 25th and 24th floors of a building on Avenida Paulista, while the city outside spun around unaware that two strangers were learning to exist for each other. Marina, try. When we leave here, I'd like to have coffee with you, not in the office, somewhere real. She let go of his hand, not out of rejection, out of fear. Rafael, you're the director. I'm the cleaning lady. You know that's not... I know what people are going to say, he interrupted with a firmness she hadn't expected. I've spent 8 years living by what people say, 8 years married to the right woman, in the right job, in the right neighborhood. And you know where I am? Stuck in an elevator at 7 in the morning. And the person I've most wanted to talk to in the last few months is someone whose name I only learned 3 weeks ago. He paused. That says something about me, Marina. And it's not something nice. But it's true. Marina felt the tears welling up before she could hold them back. They weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of something deeper, something older. The emotion of being seen, truly seen. Not as a uniform, not as a function, not as efficient and discreet. Seen as a person, as a woman, as someone who could have been a writer. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and said, her voice trembling but clear, I drink black coffee without sugar. He smiled. I know. I saw the cup you leave in the pantry. And at that moment, Marina understood that she wasn't the only one observing. The elevator started moving again at 8:12 in the morning, almost 2 hours after it had stopped. When the doors opened on the ground floor, there was a maintenance technician, the building's security guard, and Dona Geralda, who was waiting for Marina with her arms crossed and an expression that was already a sentence. Where were you? Do you know what time it is? The 10th floor is filthy. Marina opened her mouth to explain, but Rafael spoke first. He stepped out of the elevator, calmly adjusted his jacket, and looked at Dona Geralda with the same authority he used when presiding over board meetings. She was with me. The elevator got stuck. If there are any problems with her schedule, the responsibility lies with the building's maintenance, and I will personally ensure that this is recorded. Dona Geralda paled. She opened and closed her mouth silently, like a fish out of water. The security guard nodded in confirmation. Marina said nothing. She only felt for the first time in a long time that someone had chosen to be on her side. The following days were strange. Marina continued cleaning the 28th floor, but now there was something different in the air, a gentle electricity, a mutual awareness that transformed every gesture into a coded message. Rafael began leaving little notes on the corner of the table, notes that only Marina would recognize. The cup was perfect today, thank you. Good morning, writer. Black coffee, no sugar, at 6 p.m. at the corner coffee shop, if you want. She kept each note in her uniform pocket, and at night she reread them in her room, sitting on the bed, with the door closed and her heart open. They were small pieces of paper, written with the blue pen, the one from Good Days. Each one weighed more than any contract Rafael had ever signed. On the day of the coffee gathering, Marina almost didn't go. She changed her clothes 3 times. She didn't have many options. A white blouse her mother had ironed, jeans, and simple shoes. She opened the bathroom drawer and saw the pink lipstick. She stared at it for almost a minute. Then she picked it up, opened it, and applied it to her lips with the care of someone drawing something fragile. She looked at herself in the mirror. She didn't think she was beautiful. She thought she was brave. And at that moment, that was enough. Dona Esther saw her daughter getting ready and didn't ask anything. She simply said, "You look beautiful, daughter." Marina kissed her mother's hand and left. The coffee shop was small, on a side street off Paulista Avenue, one of those that have been there for decades without anyone noticing. Rafael was sitting at a table in the back, without a jacket or tie, wearing a simple button-down shirt and looking like someone who had tried to appear normal. When Marina entered, he stood up, not out of corporate politeness, out of instinct, because her presence demanded that he stand. "You came," he said, and there was relief in his voice. "I almost didn't come," Marina said, sitting down, "but I thought courage deserved another chance." They ordered coffee, black, without sugar, 2 of the same kind. And they began to converse as one only converses when one has the rare opportunity to start a new acquaintance from scratch, knowing that the 0 already contains years of mutual observation. Marina talked about her mother, about Capon Redondo, about the school she dropped out of, about the teacher who said she wrote well. Rafael listened without interrupting, with an attention she had never received from anyone. He talked about his distant father, about the wrong marriage, about the feeling of having built an entire life to please people who would never be satisfied. Marina listened with the same attention. "Do you know what I envy most about you?" Rafael said at one point. Marina raised her eyebrows. "I would envy many things about you, but about me?" He nodded. "You are whole. You are who you are. You don't have a public version and a private version. You're Marina everywhere, all the time. I have so many versions of myself that sometimes I forget which one is the original." Marina stirred the coffee that didn't need stirring. "You think I'm whole because you haven't seen my cracks? I saw your hands," he said, "and they told me more truth than any financial report I've ever read." They didn't kiss that day, nor the next, nor the following week. What blossomed between them was slower and more solid than passion. It was recognition. 2 lonely souls who met and decided, without haste and without promises, to walk side by side to see where the road led. But the world outside the elevator, in the cafeteria, was not kind. When the building staff began to notice that Rafael greeted Marina by name and sometimes stopped in the hallway to exchange a sentence or two with her, murmurs began. The receptionist whispered to the secretary whispered to the other director commented to the partner. The partner, who was Rafael's former father-in-law, absorbed the information with the calculated satisfaction of someone collecting ammunition. Dona Geralda was the cruelest. She called Marina into the storeroom one morning and said, her voice thick with venom disguised as concern, "Look, Marina, I know you're a humble girl, and it's not your fault you're naive, but that director there, Motta, he's using you. These rich men do this. They take the maid, play around a bit, and then throw her away. Do you think he's going to marry you? Do you think you're going to take off that uniform and enter his world? Wake up, girl." The words pierced Marina like fine needles that don't bleed on the outside. She listened, nodded, and left the storeroom. She went back to work. She cleaned the 10th floor, the 15th, the 20th. When she reached the 28th, she sat in the staff bathroom and cried. Not for long. Long enough to release the poison, not enough to let herself be poisoned. At the cafeteria, days later, Marina told Rafael what Dona Geralda had said, not out of complaint, out of honesty. "She said you're using me." Rafael was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "And you? What do you think?" "I think that if you were using me, you wouldn't have asked what I would write." He reached out his hand across the table. She took it, like in an elevator. Same texture, same contrast, same meaning. "Marina, I don't know what's going to happen between us. I'm in the middle of a divorce. My ex-father-in-law wants to destroy me. The company is in chaos. I have nothing stable to offer you. But I know one thing. When I wake up in the morning, the first thing that makes me want to get up is knowing that I'm going to see you." It was the most imperfect, truest, and most beautiful statement Marina had ever heard. The following months were an ordeal. Rafael's divorce became public and petty. Beatriz, advised by her father, tried to tarnish his reputation, insinuating incompetence and misconduct. At the company, the atmosphere became unbearable. Some colleagues distanced themselves, others, a few, remained. Marina was called to the Limpomax headquarters and informed that her contract would not be renewed. "Restructuring," the manager said, without looking her in the eye. Geralda's niece was already in uniform and ready. Marina returned her badge, gathered her things, and left through the back door, as she did every day. She didn't cry there. She cried on the bus, her face turned towards the fogged-up window, watching the city pass by in a blur. When she told Rafael, he wanted to intervene. He wanted to call the company, he wanted to hire a lawyer. Marina said no. "If you do that, they'll say I was only with you for the money, and I will never accept anyone thinking that. Not you, not them, not myself." There was a dignity in her voice that silenced Rafael. It wasn't pride. It was something rarer and stronger. Self-respect that is non-negotiable. She found another job within 2 weeks, cleaning at a hospital in the east side of town. Worse hours, lower pay, longer commute. But it was work, and work for Marina was the ground that never left her. Dona Esther noticed her daughter's increased fatigue and started cooking at night, despite the pain in her hands, so that Marina would find food ready when she arrived. Rafael and Marina continued seeing each other. Not every day, but with the regularity possible between two worlds that society insisted on keeping separate. The meetings were simple: coffee, walks, conversations on park benches. Once he tried to take her to a fancy restaurant. She looked at the menu without prices, looked at him and said, "Take me where you go when you want to feel at home." He thought for a moment, then took her to an old bakery in Basiga, where his grandfather used to take him as a child. They ordered bread with butter and coffee with milk. He told her about his grandfather. She told him about her father who never returned. They exchanged stories like people exchange childhood trading cards, discovering that the missing pieces in one were sometimes the ones that were superfluous in the other. Rafael's former father-in-law, Cavalcanti, made his move in October. He called a board meeting and proposed Rafael's exit from the partnership, claiming strategic differences. In reality, it was revenge. Revenge for the divorce, for wounded pride, for the rejected daughter. Rafael could have fought. He had arguments, he had results, he had numbers in his favor. But he looked around that mahogany table, the same table Marina had cleaned every morning for 4 years, and realized he no longer wanted to fight for a place that was never truly his. He accepted the offer to leave. He negotiated his share with professional detachment and left the Paulista building one October afternoon with a cardboard box containing books, a blue pen, a black pen, and the wedding photo that could finally be thrown away. Marina found out through his message. "I left the company. I'm at the bakery in Bexiga. Come whenever you can." She went. She found him sitting at the same table as always, with the cardboard box on the floor and an expression that mixed loss and relief, like someone taking off a shoe that had always pinched. "And now?" Marina asked, sitting down opposite him. "Now I need to discover who I am without the suit." She reached across the table. He took it. "You're the man who asked me for black coffee without sugar and a note written with a blue pen." He laughed, a laugh that came from a deep place where fear is kept. "Is that enough?" "For me, it is." The following months were a period of rebuilding. Rafael used the money from his departure to open a small independent consulting firm without the Motta and Cavalcanti name, without glass walls, without mahogany offices. A simple space in a more modest commercial building with a team of 3 people and a philosophy he would never have dared to have before, to do things well, with decency, without lying. Marina stayed at the hospital. The work was hard, the shifts long, but she found something she didn't expect: purpose. The patients noticed her, the elderly especially. An 80-year-old lady named Dona Carmela would hold Marina's hand every time she passed through the room and say, "You have good hands, my daughter, hands that care." And Marina felt that, for the first time, the work of her hands was being recognized not by the surface they cleaned, but by the warmth they transmitted. One November night, Rafael showed up at the apartment in Capão Redondo. It was the first time he'd been there. Marina was nervous. The apartment was small, the walls needed painting, the sofa had a stain that no product would remove. But Rafael came in, greeted Dona Esther with a respect that made the old lady smile with her eyes, sat on the stained sofa as if it were the most comfortable chair in the world, and ordered a coffee. Dona Esther prepared it, with hands that ached, with a care that doesn't hurt. She served it in a simple cup, without a saucer, one of those that come on sale at the supermarket. Rafael drank slowly, savoring each sip as if it were the best coffee he had ever had. And perhaps it was. When Dona Esther went to her room, Marina sat down next to him on the sofa. "You don't need to pretend you like it here," she said. He looked at her seriously. "I'm not pretending. I'm sitting in the truest place I've ever been." Marina rested her head on his shoulder. He put his arm around her. They stayed there in silence, while the television played at an almost inaudible volume, just like Dona Esther did every night. And in that shared silence, on that stained sofa, in that small apartment in Capão Redondo, something was completed, not with grandeur, with truth. That year's Christmas was the first in many that Marina didn't spend just with her mother. Rafael brought a small tree and a package. Inside the package was a beautiful hardcover notebook with pages, a blank sheet of paper, and a new blue pen. On the card, handwritten, "For the stories of people no one sees. With love, R." Marina clutched the notebook to her chest and wept. Dona Esther wept. Rafael swallowed hard and looked out the kitchen window, the same window where Marina used to sit and gaze at the empty street, searching for answers. Now the street remained the same, but the question had changed. She began to write. On the subway, during breaks, on nights after her shift. Short stories, handwritten with the neat, round handwriting of someone who had been a good student. Stories about the lady in room 12 of the hospital who waited for the son who never came. About the doorman of the old building who knew the name of every resident, but no one knew his. About a girl who found a pink lipstick in a bathroom and decided that day, she would be pretty. Rafael read each story with the same attention he gave to financial reports, but with something no report had ever provoked in him: emotion. "You write well, Marina," he said one night, and his voice echoed that of his 4th grade teacher, as if time had finally decided to repay an old debt. Life wasn't perfect, that's not how it works. Money was still tight, the apartment was still small, Dona Esther still had pain in her hands, the hospital was still difficult. Rafael's consulting business was still struggling to establish itself. There were days when the distance between their worlds seemed insurmountable, days when Marina looked at Rafael and wondered how long it would take him to realize he could be with someone more suitable, more beautiful, richer, more everything. One of those days, she verbalized her fear. "Aren't you going to get tired of me?" They were at the bakery in Besiga, their usual spot. Rafael put down his cup and looked at her with that intensity she already knew, as familiar as the hum of the elevator at 5:40 in the morning. "Marina, I'm tired of everything in my life, of the marriage, the company, people, myself. But I never got tired of Monday mornings, because on Monday mornings I knew I would... Finding the office cared for by someone who did things with heart was the best part of my week, and I didn't even know it." She didn't answer with words. She simply held the cup with both hands, her cracked, hard-working hands, beautiful in their own way, and smiled. A smile that didn't ask for confirmation, a smile that was enough on its own. The following spring, Marina received a call from a small publisher. Rafael had sent 3 of her stories, without her knowledge, to a call for new authors he saw advertised in a newspaper. The publisher wanted to publish them. It wasn't a big contract, it wasn't fame, it wasn't fortune, it was a door. A door for someone who had spent her entire life cleaning other people's doors. When Marina found out, she was furious, then scared, then emotional. The three reactions happened in less than a minute with that speed at which true feelings override logic. "You sent it without asking me," she said, her eyes shining between anger and gratitude. "You sent my stories to strangers." Rafael held her gaze. "I did, and I would do it again, because those stories deserve to be read by more people than just me." He paused. "You wrote about people no one sees, Marina, and now someone will see them." The book was published in August, almost exactly a year after the day they were trapped in the elevator. It was thin, modest, with a simple cover and a small print run. In the dedication, Marina wrote, "For my mother, who taught me that pain is carried on the shoulders, not in the mouth, and for those who saw me when I was invisible." Donna Esther held the book in her aching hands and read the dedication aloud, slowly, as if praying. Then she hugged her daughter and said, "Your father did many wrong things, but the right thing he did was make you." The book didn't sell thousands of copies. It didn't appear on bestseller lists, but it reached hands that needed it. A nurse from the hospital where Marina worked read it and recognized the lady from room 12. A doorman from another building read it and cried, because finally someone had written about people like him. A public school teacher read it aloud to her students and then wrote to the publisher, asking for more. Marina continued working at the hospital. She continued cleaning. She continued waking up early, taking the bus, wearing her uniform. But now she carried a notebook and a blue pen in her pocket, and between one room and another, between one corridor and another, the stories continued to be born. Rafael and she never moved into a large apartment. They never took smiling photos for social media. They never pretended the difference between them didn't exist. It did exist. In the places they frequented, in the friends they had, in the way the world looked at them when they walked together. Him in a dress shirt, her in jeans and sneakers. But they had learned, in that elevator, stopped between the 25th and 24th floors, that truth is more solid than appearances, and that the truest love is not the one that ignores differences, but the one that transcends them. One Sunday morning, almost 2 years after the elevator incident, Marina woke up early out of habit. She looked at Rafael sleeping beside her. He now spent weekends in Capão Redondo, in the small apartment, on the stained sofa that had become the center of his world. She got up slowly, went to the kitchen, and sat by the window. The same window as always. The street below was empty, as it always had been. But Marina was no longer searching for answers. She held the notebook open to a blank page and wrote, with the blue pen, with cracked hands, with her whole heart. In the first line, he wrote, "She arrived every day at 5:40 in the morning, when the building was still just concrete and silence." And he continued writing. Because stories of people no one sees need to be told by someone who knows what it's like to be invisible. And Marina knew. She knew with her skin, with her hands, with eyes that had observed the world for 33 years from inside the silence. She hadn't been saved by Rafael, nor he by her. They had met at a point where two different paths crossed and decided, without guarantees, without a map, without the promise of a happy ending, to walk together. The elevator, that metal cube where it all began, was back in normal working order the day after the incident. The technicians replaced a part, tested the system, and it went up and down again as if nothing had happened. Nobody in the building remembered the day the elevator stopped working. It was a minor defect, a temporary inconvenience, a footnote in the building's history. But for two people, that stopped elevator was the beginning of everything. The place where a man who had everything and nothing met a woman who had nothing and everything. The place where silence ceased to be loneliness and became language. The place where two hands met in the dark and discovered they fit together. On the last page of the notebook, months later, Marina wrote a single sentence that she never showed to anyone, not even Rafael. A sentence that was only hers, a secret kept between the covers of a hardcover notebook. "I was seen." 2 words, all the weight in the world, all the lightness in the world. The beginning and the end of a story that, in truth, never ends. Because true love stories don't end. They only change form, like water that becomes a cloud, that becomes rain, that becomes a river again. And the river continues. It always continues. Outside the window, the Sunday sun rose slowly over Capão Redondo, painting the rooftops with a golden light that didn't discriminate in its illumination. The same light fell on the buildings of Paulista Avenue, on the mahogany tables and on the cleaning carts. The same light, the same sun, the same world seen from different heights, but equally illuminated. Marina closed her notebook, got up from the window, and went to make coffee. Black, without sugar, 2 of the same kind, one for her and one for him. As always, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. And it was, and it is. The truest things are always simple. It just takes a lifetime for us to realize them.